Welcome to the Great Basin Seasonal Outlook for April through July 2019. This is Gina Palma. Over the last 30 days, we've had near to just above normal temperatures across parts of the Arizona Strip, Utah, and Nevada, and near to just below normal temperatures in the far north side of the basin. Precipitation has also been well above normal across Nevada, Utah, and the parts of the Arizona Strip, and near normal across parts of Idaho, and then some areas just below normal. Looking at our precipitation since last October 1st, the beginning of the water year, and we've had above normal precipitation over all of the southern two-thirds of the Great Basin and near or just below normal precipitation elsewhere. Our current snowpack is well above normal across the Sierra into the high elevations of Nevada and Utah, and near normal over Idaho and Wyoming. And you can see this near normal snowpack extends also into the rest of Wyoming and up into Montana, with still above normal snowpack over into Oregon. This is very significant for the Great Basin. For one, the higher elevations have quite a bit of snow that they have not seen recently, and also we've had storms move across the Great Basin routinely over this winter and spring, bringing snow to low elevations in many sites across Nevada, into Utah, and also parts of southern Idaho. We'll talk about how this will impact the Great Basin and the outlook in the next several slides. Looking at our current drought conditions, with the wet conditions we've seen across the Great Basin, we have little to no drought in most of the area. We do have some areas that are abnormally dry across northern and southeastern Utah and into parts of Wyoming and then into the northwest. However, for most of the basin, we have no drought conditions and aren't expecting much to develop over the next few months. Again, these pockets of northern Utah or areas that remain a little bit drier may see some abnormally dry conditions increase, but right now it looks like most of the basin will not be in drought. Looking at our current fuel moistures, our 10-hour fuel moistures, more indicative of our fine fuels, drier down south where it has been a little bit drier recently as storms have now started targeting the northern two-thirds of the Great Basin, which is where our 10-hour fuel moistures are higher. Similar conditions in 100-hour fuel moistures, again quite high across the region, especially the northern half of the basin, and then same with 1,000-hour fuels, again indicating more of our timber areas. With all of that precipitation and snowpack, it's no surprise that these will remain high for some time. If we look at our current fire danger indices across parts of the Great Basin, in some of our wetter areas, western Nevada into the Sierra, which is also very indicative across much of Nevada and Utah, showing below normal ERCs. Over southeast Utah, where things have dried out a little bit more, ERCs have climbed back up to near normal. And then further north, up across parts of Wyoming and Idaho, where the precipitation has not been as plentiful or as consistent, our ERCs are above normal for the time of year. So now we'll look at some of our expected conditions since we've looked at the last couple of months with where we're coming from. Now we'll see what we're expecting for the next couple of months and how that will impact the early start to our fire season. Looking at our 8 to 14 day outlook, which takes us into the first week or two of April, temperatures may remain near to above normal, but we're still looking at that wet signature over the northern half to two-thirds of the Great Basin. The only area that will remain on the drier side of these storms in the short term will be southern Nevada, southern Utah, and the Arizona Strip. Now we'll look at how El Nino will be changing here over the coming months. This is the forecast for El Nino. Current conditions are over here on the left, and then the forecast taking us through the rest of the year spreads out to the right. You can see right now we're currently in a weak El Nino, and this will remain with the forecast kind of staying almost steady here over the next several months. Likely will remain near or in a weak El Nino over the summer and through the fire season and possibly even into the rest of the year. So how this will impact us, it has brought the wetter conditions to the southern areas of the Great Basin recently that have not or would not normally see wet conditions this time of year. So that's kind of our usual pattern for El Nino, and sometimes an El Nino can cause more of a progressive weather pattern throughout the summer, basically keeping weather conditions changing from wet to dry throughout the summer periodically and not allowing very hot, dry conditions to linger for long periods of time. So now we'll look at some of the outlooks and how they relate to some of these conditions. Our 1 month outlook, this is from the Climate Prediction Center, which takes us through April, showing still those warm conditions, temperatures on the left, precipitation is on the right. You can see again that wet signature remaining through the month with the exception of the far south. If we look at the 3 month outlook, which takes us from May through July, you can see still above normal temperatures and still that wet signature over much of the Great Basin. There's really very few areas that are even showing any remote dryness. The only exception might be through that May-June period, possibly over far southern areas of the Great Basin. The rest right now looks like it'll stay more in that progressive off-on of wet-dry pattern as we go through the next couple of months. So now we'll start putting all the pieces together and looking at our outlook and some of the reasoning behind it. First, we're going to go back to the snowpack map because that has a big significance in the kind of fuel we have to deal with going into fire season. We have had a wet winter in all elevations. We've had storms move through multiple times, bringing us low elevation snowfall across Nevada and Utah. This likely will have an impact on our carryover fuels that we've seen remain in the area for the last 2 years. So I am expecting some compaction of the fine fuels over parts of the lower terrain of Nevada and Utah. How much remains to be seen, as once we start doing some fuel sampling and having people go out in the field, we'll really get some feedback as to how much compaction took place. But I suspect there's at least some, which would reduce our fuel loading going into this fire season. Now on top of that, we have had the wet winter and the wet weather is likely to continue. Therefore, we will have new growth really in all areas of the Great Basin. However, if we take away the carryover, or at least some of the carryover, even the new growth would still allow for lower fuel loading than we've seen in the last 2 years. So lower elevations may see an impact from that. The high elevations with the snowpack still in place are likely going to see a delay to the fire season or below normal fire potential going into the summer months. So that is certainly a possibility if we don't see a warm, dry pattern emerge. And again, the low elevations, if we see this wetter, kind of continuous, periodic, wet, dry pattern continue over the next couple of months, it really won't allow fuels to critically dry out across a large portion of the Great Basin. So that potential exists as we go into the fire season. So our outlook kind of reflects part of that. April, we're looking at normal, so very minimal fire activity expected. May, minimal fire activity expected across much of the Great Basin, with the exception of the far south. We have indicated the possibility of some above normal fire potential in May and in June, just because there might be some new fine fuel growth down over southern areas, which is more than you might normally see just due to the wet winter we've seen. So you might see somewhat of a fire season initially down over the southern part of the basin, assuming we see that warmer and drier weather remain in the far south. Again, the main difference of this outlook and the outlook from the last 2 Aprils is that we have no above normal fire potential indicated through June or July across any area with the exception of the far south. That should be noteworthy and a big change from previous years. There is that potential that we could see some below normal fire potential emerge as we get towards June and July. But right now, the weather pattern, we'd like to see it be a little bit more certain before we start introducing areas of below normal. Not to say we can't have some areas of above normal, but right now that's just not looking like the conditions we're going to see going through June and July at this time. So stay tuned and definitely keep tabs on our next outlook coming out in May. That concludes our webcast for this month. Again, check back in May, and if we have any updates, we will be sure to share them.